Hey, what's up? Jack here with devslopes.com, and I'd like to welcome you back to our API course. I'm coming to you from the DevSlopes Southern Command Center, or the DSCC for short, and I've been a little bit under the weather the last few days, but I do believe I'm getting better, so we're going to go ahead and push right on through this course. Today we're going to continue our foray into JavaScript basics and talk about JavaScript objects. Now, an object is a value type that contains key value pairs inside curly braces. The keys are also known as properties, and everything in JavaScript that isn't a primitive type is an object. Primitive types are strings, numbers, booleans, undefined, null, and now with es6, a new type, symbols. When variables are used in objects, they're called properties. And when functions are used inside objects, they're called methods. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and pull up a text editor here and write some code, and let me show you an example of how objects in JavaScript work. Okay, so now that we've talked a little bit about what objects are in JavaScript, let's go ahead and take a look at, or actual look at what they look like. So one way to create an object is you can create an object literal. And what that might look like is we could say var truck and then equal and then curly braces. So we just set a variable and then equal to this block. And then inside this block, we're going to put properties. So we might have a make property, and it might be a dodge. And then a comma, and then we might have a property called wheels, which might be 4. And you'll notice in here in the properties, I put a comma if there's another line. There's no semicolons in here, but the object does end with a semicolon. So this is an object right here. And to access this object, we can either use something called bracket notation or dot notation. So first we'll take a look at bracket notation. And we're just going to console log this out to the screen. And we'll use a template string in here, and we'll just say I have a, and then inside of our $sign curly braces, we're going to refer to the object, which the variable we set was truck. And then in square brackets, kind of like array syntax, we're going to put quotes in here, and we're going to refer to the property make. So that's going to give us the make of the truck object. And then we can say that has, and then again we'll put our $sign curly braces. And then we can say wheels here. Now you do need parentheses for the properties when you're using bracket notation. And then we can just say wheels. And if I save that, you'll see over here I have a Dodge that has 4 wheels. So that's bracket notation. Now then there's another way that you can access properties and methods within an object, and that's called dot notation. So we can do the same thing here, and we'll go ahead and use our same string. I have a truck dot make that has truck dot wheels. Now this is the same thing right here as this. It's just a different syntax. This is bracket syntax. This is dot syntax. However, they're identical. If I hit save, you'll see over here they print out identical lines. It's just a different way to access properties. In my experience, I tend to prefer dot notation, and that seems to be the consensus, as most people that I've seen do too. So let's go ahead and create another object here, and we'll take a look at a method. So let's say we've got an employee. This is going to be another object literal. And what an object literal is, it's just where you create a variable and assign it an object right then. We'll take a look at constructor objects or constructor functions here in just a minute. So we could say var employee. So we're going to create a new employee equals, and we'll put brackets. And I'll go ahead and close this off. Now then we'll put our properties in here. And we may have a first name and a last name, let's say. And we'll just say Joe, and then a last name, Blow. And I'm going to go ahead and put another comma, and this time we're going to have a method in here. And like I said, a method is a function. It's just it's what they're called when they're a part of an object. Just like variables are called properties when they're in an object, a function is called a method when it's part of an object. And you give it a name just like you do your properties. So we'll say full name and then a colon, and then we'll go ahead and specify our function keyword. And then here we're just going to return a template string, and we'll just say this dot first name space this dot last name. Now there's that this keyword that we talked about in the last lesson. This refers to the object that owns the function. So this is a function here. This is the object. This is referring to the object that owns the function. So when we say this dot first name, we're saying we want this object and the first name property. This dot last name, we want this object and the last name property. So that's what this is in this context. So we've got our object created here. We can go ahead and save it. And then we can skip down here and we can say, we'll go ahead and call a method. So we can say console.log and then put our template string in here, and we can say our IT director is, and then we refer to the object employee dot and then first name. That's what we're going to do in this instance. Actually, this is a property. We'll look at the method here in just a second. So if I save that, you see here we get our IT director as Joe. Now to call the method, we can do the same similar thing. We'll just say console.log, and we'll just say his full name is. We'll refer to the object, and we'll call the method full name with our parentheses there. Close that off with a semicolon, save, and you'll see we get our IT director is Joe, his full name is Joe Blow. So that's the basics of object literals. We create the object, assign it to a variable, and then it's just key value pairs. These are properties, this is a function. It's pretty simple. Now we'll go on and move on and look at some object constructor functions and things. But this is how you create an object literal. Okay, so we've taken a look at object literals. Let's move on. We're going to talk about object constructor functions. So object literals are good if you just need to create a one-off object real quick. If you're going to have several of the same type of object, several instances, then you may want to use an object constructor function. The way we're going to declare, or the way we're going to use an object constructor function is we're first going to use our function keyword. And then in this instance, I'm going to use a vehicle as the example here. And then we're going to pass in the make, model, and year. And put our curly braces there. Now inside this object constructor function here, we need to set our properties. Now we're passing in the make, model, and year. So we're going to specify this.make is equal to make. And notice here in this object constructor function, we are putting semicolons after these statements. So we've got this.model is equal to model, and this.year is equal to year. And we can put a method in here as well. We can say this.get full description is equal to another function, and then we can return a template string, this.make, actually this.year, this.make, helps if I put my curly braces in there, and then this.model. And then we do need to end that with a semicolon. So this is what an object constructor function looks like. And you can see this is a way to create a bunch of different types of vehicles. So to put this in use, we could say, just for instance, my truck. Actually, let me put a comment here. We're going to create new instances of type vehicle with the new keyword. So I could say let my truck equal new vehicle, and then I could pass in the values. So we need to make first a Dodge, and it's a Ram 1500, and your model's 2011. So that is how we just created a new object, a new vehicle object called my truck. I can also create, let me go ahead and create a couple more. Alright, so I've created 3 new objects here. New vehicle objects called my truck, my wife's car, and my daughter's car. Now we can print those out. We can just say console.log, and then I can just say my truck.year, comma, my truck.make, and my truck.model. If I save that, you see over here I get 2011 Dodge Ram 1500. Pretty simple. Now then, if we want to call this method here, all I've got to do is I could say console.log, and I could say my wife's car dot get full description. Save that, and you see here I get 2015 Dodge Charger RT. So very similar to our object literal. The only thing is it's a constructor function. And when we use it, we're just assigning a variable to a new instance of this vehicle. Pretty straightforward, very handy. So let's move on and look at one more way to create an object. And then we're going to take a look at es6, Enhanced Object Literal Syntax. Now with this one here, we used, and you notice I used a capital V here. This is because this is the constructor function, and we usually refer to those by convention with a capital V because this is the type that we're creating. So we could also make kind of it's almost like a factory method or something. We could just say function create vehicle, and we could pass in the make, model, and year. And then inside of our curly braces, instead of using this to assign the properties, we could just say return and our curly braces. And what we're doing here is we're returning a new object. So here we can just say make is make, model is model, and year is year. And then we could also go ahead and do our function while we're at it. We could say get full description, And then we could say function and go ahead and create our function, return. We can just say get full description and then function and return what we want to return. And then from here, we could just say let my truck 2 equal to create vehicle. And then I could pass in the values here. Okay, and so we've got three new vehicles created here by using this function and returning this. And then from here we can do the same thing. We can just call that method. So we could just say console.log, and we could say my truck 2 dot get full description. And I misspelled daughter up here. And if I save that, you'll see we get the same thing over here on the left. So this is just another way to do it. In this object constructor function, we're assigning the properties and the method with this. And this one, we're using a return statement to just return a new object. And we didn't use the new keyword here. Now then, one last thing to look at is es6 enhanced object literal syntax. So I'm going to copy this function and then I'm going to comment it out. And then I'm going to paste it in right here. This is es6 enhanced object literal syntax. So we could change this method here and we could do this. So we've got create vehicle, make model year, return, and with es6 enhanced object literal syntax, anytime you're assigning a property and the property name and what you're passing in are identical, you don't have to type both, and you can get rid of the colon. So that becomes just make, this becomes just model, and this becomes just year. Now then, so that's how the properties work. As far as the function goes, we can actually remove this function keyword here, as well as the colon, and it becomes just get full description with our parentheses. And then we've still got our return statement here. So this block of code here and this block of code are identical. This is just a new es6 enhanced object literal syntax. And it's just made to make our code a little neater, so you're not repetitively typing things. Under the hood, it's still identical. There's still a make key and a make value here. It's just with es6, they don't require you to type it if they're the same. And if I save it, you'll see over here on the left we get the same result. So that's a look at objects, object constructor functions, and the new es6 object or enhanced object literal syntax. So that's about all we're going to cover on objects for now. We'll take a look at them more later, but let's go ahead and move on for now.